That incredible quiet focus you sometimes see on a little kid's face when they're just totally immersed in Play-Doh or maybe lost in a drawing.
Oh, yeah, that concentration. It's
It's
made
like just fun, right? But actually, underneath all that, it's often a period of really significant learning and, well, growth.
absolutely. There's so much happening.
Welcome, everyone, to the Early IB Foundations and Futures. Today, we're doing a deep dive into the really powerful role of art, specifically in those crucial early years.
We're going to explore the the huge opportunities these creative activities can offer for development.
We've got a great source to guide us today. It's an article by Deanna Pecaski McLennan called Process or Product: The Argument for Aesthetic Exploration in the Early Years.
It's a really compelling piece. It definitely makes you stop and think about how young children engage with art and what they genuinely get out of it.
It really does. So our mission for this deep dive is to get really clear on the difference between what we often call art and maybe craft when we're talking about young kids.
And maybe more importantly, why focusing on the the actual process of making art is considered so vital for their development.
Exactly. McLennan's main point really is that when we shift our focus away from just the finished thing, the end product,
Yeah, the thing they take home.
right. When we shift from that to the actual experience of creating it, we unlock a whole load of benefits for these young learners. So maybe the best place to start is, what is the difference we're talking about here between art and craft?
That's definitely the place to start. It's crucial. The article actually quotes a blog post that puts it really clearly. It says something like, a craft is usually a cookie cutter or close-ended activity
Okay, cookie cutter.
that is based on a formula or recipe,
Mm-hmm.
and all participants follow the same directions and end up with roughly the same result every time. Think about those kits you can buy.
Oh, yeah, where everyone makes the exact same felt owl or whatever.
Precisely.
Right.
Or the article mentions things like making a paper plate animal where all the shapes are pre-cut for you.
Right, and you just have to stick the triangle ears here and the circle eyes there.
Exactly. Or using stickers to copy a design someone else made, or just coloring in photocopy sheets. The main goal is getting it right, following the steps. There's not much space for the child's own ideas.
Okay, so that's craft. How does the article define art then, in contrast?
Well, art is framed as much more open-ended. The quote continues, saying it's a work that transcends its humble materials to create an original statement or expression in a meaningful and enduring way.
That sounds quite profound.
It is. Think about things like just giving a child clay and letting them sculpt whatever they imagine, or providing paints, different brushes, different colors, and just seeing what happens.
So the results would be totally different for each child.
Completely. Or even experimenting with printmaking. Each print is naturally unique. The key thing is that it's personal. It comes from their experiences, their perspective.
So it really is less about the final thing looking a particular way and much more about what's happening while they're doing it, the exploration, the trying things out.
That's it. And that leads us straight into why this process focus is seen as so much more valuable than just having a nice finished product.
Right. So what are the big advantages?
Well, this process-focused approach really fuels personal discovery, but also communal exploration too. Kids aren't just making something, they're expressing thoughts, feelings.
And probably talking about it while they do it.
Often, yes.
Yep.
They communicate, share ideas with friends working nearby. These open-ended activities, they feel authentic to the child. They also naturally cater to different kids, different learning styles. It's just a much more kind of holistic way to learn.
Holistic. Okay. Can you give some examples of the specific skills or maybe abilities that process art helps kids develop?
Sure. The article makes a really interesting connection to preparing kids for an unknown future, which, let's face it, is what we're doing, right?
True. The world changes so fast.
Exactly. So process art helps build skills they'll definitely need. Things like creative thinking, obviously, but also problem solving and this idea of reflexivity.
Reflexivity. What's that exactly?
It's basically the ability to think about what you're doing, reflect on your actions, and learn from them. It encourages kids to, engage creatively when faced with a challenge, an aesthetic challenge in this case.
So they're choosing materials, figuring out how to show their idea.
Yes, and even being able to talk about why they made certain choices.
Okay, that's a really clear difference. Because with a craft, the problem is set, the solution is given.
Right.
But with art, the child is navigating it themselves. Now, the article does talk about the flip side, the potential downsides of focusing too much on those product-driven craft activities. What are the main worries there?
I think the biggest one mentioned is how it can potentially stifle creativity.
Mm.
If the aim is for everyone's work to look the same or very similar.
And there's no room for your own take on it.
Exactly. It limits individual interpretation of their own work and their friends' work. The article even brings in Freire's idea, the banking concept of education.
Ah, the idea that kids are empty vessels we just pour knowledge into.
That's the one. In the craft context, the instructions are like the knowledge being deposited. There's not much room for genuine, wrestling with ideas or expressing something unique.
And because of that, there's less for them to actually explain about their work, right? Because it wasn't really their unique creation.
Precisely. Now, the article does acknowledge, that crafts can have benefits. Fine motor skills, following directions.
Sure, those are useful skills.
They are. But the article argues the level of thinking involved, the cognitive engagement, and definitely the creative development are much lower than what you get with open-ended art.
Okay.
And it raises a really good question about assessment, too. If we're mostly doing these crafts, what are we actually measuring? Is it their artistic voice or just how well they followed the steps?
That's a fair point. Are we checking for creativity or compliance?
Right. The suggestion is maybe those structured activities are better suited for other subjects, like assemble a model of the human body in science, where the goal is accuracy, not artistic exploration.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's flip back to the process side. When we do focus on process-oriented art, what are the really positive things kids experience?
Oh, the article paints a picture of vibrant classrooms, places where kids can get completely lost in making art. It connects this to another idea from Freire, the problem-posing model of education.
Where learning is more about active discovery.
Exactly. Journeying, experimenting, it's about nurturing critical thinking, the ability to analyze things, evaluate information. Art making becomes this, lived experience. It connects thinking and doing directly.
Lived experience, I like that. And the article mentions 3 kinds of thinking involved: knowing, doing, and making.
Yes, that framework. It highlights that art isn't just messing about physically. It involves cognition, expression. It's
complex.
Sounds it. And there's a fantastic example in the article. Students creating winter scenes after reading the book Stranger in the Woods.
Okay.
They all use similar stuff, chalk, pastels, inspired by the same story.
Mm-hmm.
But every single picture was unique. It showed their own understanding, their imagination.
Yeah. So even with the same starting point, the process leads to individuality.
Totally. And what was also really important was the discussion happening during the art making. They talked about the story.
Yeah.
But also their own memories of winter and questions about the materials. How does this chalk work? What happens if I blend these colors?
Ah, so the process itself sparks all this other learning and conversation.
Definitely. Really valuable stuff.
Now, if the results are so personal and varied, how on earth do you assess a child's progress in art? It can't be about, how good their drawing is in a conventional sense.
No, not at all. The assessment shifts completely. The article explains it's more about observing how the child engages, looking at their work habits, how they use the materials during the process.
So watching them work.
Yes, and using open-ended questions, asking why and how to get them talking about their choices, interpreting their own work. You're looking at things like, can they choose materials purposefully? Do they try using them in new ways? And like we said, can they talk about what they did and why?
So you're valuing their thinking, their artistic journey, not just the final picture.
Precisely.
Okay, so for educators listening, or even parents wanting to encourage this, what are some practical ways to really foster this kind of aesthetic exploration?
The article has some great suggestions. Really valuing all kinds of artistic expression is key. Providing a wide range of materials, easily accessible, maybe in a dedicated art space.
Making it inviting.
Yeah. And offering chances for kids to work alone sometimes, but also in small groups. And a simple but powerful thing, decorating the classroom with the children's own artwork.
Instead of store-bought posters.
Exactly. It sends a message.
Yeah.
Your work, your creativity, it matters here. And going a step further, maybe adding a little note with the child's own words describing their art, or even photos of them actually making it.
Oh, documenting the process.
Yes.
Yeah.
It really honors that journey. The article uses this lovely phrase, viewing the classroom as a living blank canvas that's constantly being shaped by the children's ideas.
That's a really nice image. It sounds like it would build a real sense of ownership. Now, the article also mentions aesthetic knowledge. That sounds a bit academic. What does it mean in practice?
It's basically about using arts-based ways of knowing to understand things across different subjects. So not just learning about art, but using artistic exploration, engaging all the senses, sight, sound, touch, to build really rich personal understanding of things.
So using art to learn about science or history, for example.
Potentially, yes. It allows kids to connect the sort of outer world of creating something with their inner world of thinking and feeling and reflecting. They're building their own interpretations, less just taking in facts.
Makes learning more personal, deeper.
That's the idea. It fosters independent thinking, questioning assumptions, and the article notes this can be particularly powerful when kids work together on a communal art project, that shared creative experience.
So it really is about making learning more embodied, more deeply felt. Okay, lastly, the article zooms out a bit, talking about creating lifelong artists. That feels like a big, important goal.
It really does. There's a quote from Postman: "Children are the living message we send to a time we will not see." It just hammers home the lasting impact of these early experiences.
Wow. Yeah.
And there's a bit of a warning, too, a concern that sometimes schools get stuck in outdated ways of thinking about education. The argument is that focusing on process, especially in art, really empowers kids to build their own deep personal understanding of the world.
Rather than just accepting fixed answers.
Right. It mentions appreciating the flowing interrelatedness of all life, not just looking for the single right answer. So at the end of the day, giving kids these chances to question, explore, reflect through art, it's seen as a crucial investment in their future and ours.
Okay, so if we were to boil down this deep dive, the main takeaway is really the huge value in that process-focused art for young children. It's so much more than just making something pretty.
Absolutely. It's about fostering creativity, critical thinking, connection, all that rich internal stuff.
And we've got a clearer sense now of that difference between art, the open-ended exploration, and craft, which tends to be more about following steps to a set outcome.
Yeah, a really important distinction to keep in mind.
So for everyone listening, maybe take a moment to think about the learning environments you see, whether you're an educator, a parent, just an observer. How much focus is there on that journey of discovery versus just getting the final product right?
It's a good question to ponder.
And maybe a final thought to leave you with. How can we, as a wider community, really prioritize and support this kind of rich, process-based art exploration in the early years? How do we really empower that next generation creatively?
Lots to think about there.
Definitely. Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive. It's been a fascinating exploration.
My pleasure. It's such an important topic.